I want to go right now to the Liberty University Newsmaker line. Always honored to have our good friend Tim Murtaugh, who is a fellow over at the Heritage Foundation. Tim, hope you're doing good today.
Doing well, Todd. Great to be with you.
So I want to get your reaction here to this news. Will Smith announcing that, you know what, we're pulling out of Georgia, and it looks like a lot of people are going to lose their jobs as a result of that.
You know, this is just another case of absurd double standards. I mean, these actors, Will Smith, trying to stand up and show that he's got convictions, right, by punishing the people who will lose their jobs as a result of him taking his movie away from Georgia. But he was perfectly fine to film a PSA for China for the release of Bad Boys 3, another one of his movies. That was fine. And so he's okay with those human rights abuses. But, you know, asking people to show an ID to vote, that's where Will Smith draws the line. Genocide and concentration camps in China, not really on his radar. But you ask someone to prove who they are when they go and exercise their right to vote, and that's just too far for Will Smith. It's absurd.
And you know, again, it's ignorance and stupidity. I mean, they clearly have not read the law. There are other states that have much stronger laws on the books, including New Jersey and New York. And then there's polling data out there. Tim, there's a Rasmussen report survey. 69% of black voters, 75% overall support voter ID laws.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. And the reason why the Democrats have been forced to lie about what's in the Georgia law can be found in that, because it's common sense. When you are going to exercise your right to vote, to prove that you are who you say you are. And what is the big deal? They try to make it sound like that the voters of color are somehow incapable of producing identification. Americans have to produce ID in any manner of everyday activities every single day. And in fact, if it is a financial burden on you to get a driver's license or other form of government ID, Georgia will provide an ID free of charge. So that argument goes out the window. And Todd, this is the timeline of what went on in the Georgia law, especially with respect to Major League Baseball and Coke and Delta and the other ones that you've been talking about. Here's the timeline. Democrats lied about what was in the Georgia law. And then they got the corporations all spun up. And the corporations, of course, the first thing they do is they cave in to the liberal pressure. That includes Major League Baseball and Coke and Delta and the others. And what happens then? Because the All Star Game gets yanked from Atlanta, Georgia, and moved to Denver, Atlanta is 51% black. Denver, by the way, is less than 10% black. So the black-owned businesses in the Atlanta area are going to be punished as the All Star Game is pulled out. Then, realizing that it was bad, Joe Biden, Stacey Abrams, Senator Warnock, Senator Ossoff, they all tried to distance themselves from MLB's decision to pull the All-Star Game. And then Stacey Abrams said, well, I didn't want them to do that. What did she think was going to happen? And then we find out overnight that Senator Warnock lied in his statement about what was in the bill. He sent out a statement that criticized things that were in the bill when it was going through the legislature. It's not in the law, the things that he was critical of. But that didn't stop him from raising hell about it and making MLB and Coke and Delta and others bow at the altar of liberal pressure. And that's exactly what happened. And who's going to pay the price for this? It's the black-owned businesses in the city of Atlanta. That's the result.
And again, it goes back to the overarching question, why are they doing this? I mean, the Democrats, they see the same polling data we see. It seems like there is this intentional effort to make this about race, much like the Democrats have made these police incidents about race when race is truly not a factor. What do you think the long game argument here is?
Well, I think this is what their plan is, and it's a two-tracked approach. What their ultimate goal is to pass H.R. 1, which is jokingly called the For the People Act. And what it does is nationalize elections and put into law all of the things that were put in as a result of the pandemic. You know, these things like drop boxes in Georgia, which, by the way, didn't exist before the pandemic, things like that. They want H.R. 1 to be the law of the land to cement the liberal control of Congress for decades to come. Now, in order to achieve that, they've got to do a couple of things. They have to identify a problem and say, this is exactly why we need H.R. 1, and that's the Georgia law. So they have to demonize the Georgia law, and the easiest way, and their go-to in most situations, is to call it racist. That's their excuse for needing H.R. 1. We've got to fix this with this federal law and have Congress take over the elections. Now, how do they do that? There's not a chance that H.R. 1 would pass the Senate with the 60 votes required. So they have to get rid of the filibuster. And so how do they attack the filibuster? You guessed it. They call that racist, too. All of this is towards the goal of having the federal government take over state elections to make sure that liberals can remain in power for decades to come. That's what all of this is about.